Hey there, and welcome to Insomnia Insight number 336, which is a really personal one, and I believe a really important one. I am going to introduce you to a new school of thinking, if you will, a new philosophy that I hope will bring a lot of value to everyone that comes across it. And on a personal note, I feel like this is perhaps going to be something of like my legacy, my contribution to the world of sleep and beyond, really. So really, it's really personal one. I hope you'll find it really helpful. And the reasons I want to talk about it is that I've been working this for a while, but I feel now at least there is enough of structure that I think we can start using it and applying it. I want you to know if you start hearing me using kind of new words, new terminology, where it comes from, and I want you to be part of the process, because literally everything that I'm going to share today, I've learned from people like yourselves, people that have left comments and sent me emails and things of that nature. And going forward too, I would love for you to be part of working on this new approach to trouble sleeping and other circular problems. We'll talk more about those in a second, but this is kind of like the reason I want to talk about this today. So I want to share a few kind of like mini stories, and then I'm going to present a document that I'm working on that is like the core of the philosophy at this point. So I want to say about 3-4 months ago, I was asked to write a column in our local newspaper about sleep, and I of course wanted to write about insomnia, and I wrote a short column called Set It and Forget It, which later became the name of my book. A couple of weeks later, I was talking to a patient who was a lady I think in her 70s or so. She had sleep apnea. That's why I was seeing her, and she was doing well. But then before we ended the Zoom call, she said, "There's one more thing." She said, "I read your column," and she said, "I've had trouble sleeping for many years, but when I read your column, that's when I started to understand. And just by reading that, I realized I was paying too much attention. I was trying too much. And now that I've been letting go, I've been sleeping much better." She said, "Thank you." And that was amazing. I mean, I'm always super happy when anybody tells me I'm sleeping better. That in itself was such a sweet reward. But what really struck me was that this lady had read a column in a newspaper, in this traditional media, an old school newspaper that maybe she got delivered every day to her doorsteps. And what struck me with that was that we don't need apps. We don't need YouTube, really. We don't need any particular medium, or let me rephrase that, all of it works. It doesn't matter if you read a book or a column in a newspaper, or you see a YouTube video, or you see something on an app. What matters is the teaching, the education. The teaching is the core. That's what matters. So that really struck me there. And that's the reason I bring up that here is that what I'm talking about here is my kind of new approach to teaching, kind of this philosophy that I'm building. So and that's the teaching, I think, is the core of really everything I do. So I want to bring that up. Now, secondly, I think, and a lot of you know this, that I started this channel basically as a way of spreading the CBT-I gospel. I thought nobody has heard of CBT-I, and we got to get the word out. But during the last 2 years, I've discovered that CBT-I is far from perfect. There are a lot of problems with CBT-I. It can work really well for some people, but there are a lot of people who are not doing well. And the core of that, I think, is because of effort. Sleep is a passive process. You sleep really well when you're not trying to sleep. And the two behavioral techniques that CBT-I really has come to center around, sleep restriction and stimulus control, can lead in both directions. Sometimes somebody spends a really little time in bed, they start sleeping better, and they're seeing like, oh, I can sleep, there's nothing wrong with me, building sleep confidence, and then they can spend more time in bed, and in that case, sleep restriction has led to less effort, and it works really well. Same thing with stimulus control. If somebody is spending not getting out of the bed when they can't sleep, going back to sleep, they're kind of like, oh, I'm trying less to sleep. Oh, and sleep comes easier to me. works really good, but they can go in the opposite direction. If somebody's like, I gotta stay up until midnight because I have to create a really strong sleep, I gotta sleep, sleep restriction can backfire. It becomes an effort and you have more trouble sleeping. Same thing with stimulus control. I've been in bed 30 minutes, I gotta get out, now I have to wait, now I have to get back in bed, now I gotta sleep, I'll have a little time to sleep. It becomes an effort and it creates more trouble sleeping. So those were the things that I identified that were problematic with CBT-I, which then led me to this position where I was thinking, what am I really doing here? Am I, is my philosophy kind of a version of CBT-I, or is it something different? And the more I've been learning and incorporating, questions and comments and different thinkings, etc., I became to think, I think this is something different. I don't think I'm doing CBT-I anymore. So that's been on my mind for a while. And then another thing that has been on my mind for a long time was this one. Whenever somebody's sleeping better, I try to ask that person, okay, what do you think was really helpful to you? What helped you the most? And probably the most common thing you hear is somebody say, I just stopped caring. I don't care as much, And some people say I stopped worrying and etc. But I didn't care as much was the most common thing, and that some people that really resonated with said that, yeah, I also stopped caring and now I'm good. Other people said, well, how's that? That doesn't ring true to me. Like, we all care. You should care. Like, who truly in deep down doesn't care if they sleep or not? And that led me to realize that the person who says I sleep really well now because I don't care, it is actually not so much that they don't care. They still care. They still want to sleep well, but they're not as attached anymore. When they say I don't care, that means if I sleep good, that's great. I'm happy. If I don't sleep well, that's okay. That's acceptable. So what's happened is really that person has become less attached to sleep. They still care. They can still care a lot. In fact, there's no conflict there. You can be one of those people who like, I love my sleep. I enjoy sleeping. I really want to sleep well, but if I don't, that's okay. That person cares very deeply about their sleep, but they're not attached. Attachment, I felt, was really, really a key, And since I've been thinking about that, an analogy that I think really helps contextualize this is an athlete. I thought about like athletes; they must be really attached to the outcome, attached to winning. Or the more I thought it, the more I realized that top athletes are not actually attached, because if they were, they wouldn't do well. If you take somebody like Michael Jordan, for example, I'm just watching a documentary on Michael Jordan. He was super, super competitive. But guess what? When he lost, he was upset. He wanted to win, but he shook everybody's hands, said, this is part of the game, I'm accepted, you were the better team, etc. If Michael Jordan had been attached, super attached to winning, then it wouldn't actually have worked out, because when he lost, he would have been like, it's hopeless, I give up, nothing works, I can't, it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for me to not win. So when I don't win, that's it, I give up, So Michael Jordan, he wanted to win badly, but he accepted that sometimes you don't. He was not that attached to winning. He was actually, so an athlete, the more detached you are from winning, the more you can actually focus on the goal. Like, sleep is a completely passive process, so that part is not good with this analogy, but it still, shows that you can want something, you can care about something, but still not be attached to the outcome. Either outcome, if you get that thing you want or not, both are acceptable to you, and that, I believe, that is the key here. That's where you want to be. You want to get to a place where you can care a lot about your sleep, but if you don't sleep, that's acceptable. You're not that attached to it anymore. So all those things were on my mind for quite a while, for several months. And then there was this random moment right here in our living room where my wife said something like, this happened, but it's okay. I'm not attached to the outcome. She said like that. She said, I'm not attached to the outcome. And when I heard that, I was like, I said, you were Natto. She was like, what? You were Natto. You were not attached to the outcome. And she was smiling, and I was like, that had a nice ring to it. It sounded kind of nice and fresh, Natto, and it also really harbored, my entire thinking in that phrase. So I decided that's it. This is what I'm going to call this new philosophy, this new teaching I'm working on. I had already actually started accumulating like these insights, if you will. Another thing that had been going on in my mind is that I noticed that I was explaining things kind of over and over again, but there was no word for it. For example, I would tell people that, you're doing better for a while, but you're sleeping better for a couple of days, and then you become like, you find that, almost troubling. That could this be true? Like, is this for real? Or can I really sleep this well? You pay more attention, and then you don't sleep well because you were kind of getting worried about losing something you had, or you thought this couldn't be real or something like that. And then I realized I say this over and over again, but there's no word for it. I'm going to call this success regress, right? So I had already started working on a document on those things, and I decided, okay, I'm going to incorporate this document. Is going to be a core teaching of this new philosophy that I thought about as Natto. And for a while I was thinking, what can I call it? Can I call it Natto Do, like Aikido, Judo, like that? Because I've just read a Bruce Lee book. I said, no, that sounds too like martial artsy, like how about the way of Natto? I toyed around with Nattology, Nattoism, but then finally I said, no, I think let's just go with the simple thing of, I'm just going to call the whole thing Natto. So with that said, I hope that was a nice little backdrop to this document that I want to share with you. In this, I'm developing this at this point as like a coaching manual, and I want to share this with you. So I want to read a little bit from the beginning. I said in introduction here, Natto is the study of approaching non-attachment to the outcome. Natto is a school or path towards no longer having circular problems. A circular problem is any trouble that comes from the desire to escape said trouble. And so to expand a little bit on that, insomnia, for example, is when you have trouble sleeping, that comes from the desire to sleep, not just like wanting to sleep. Everybody wants to sleep well, but when you have the desire, like I need sleep, I want sleep, I crave for it, I can't get it, what's going on? That type of desire, when that feeds trouble sleeping, then that gets you into the circular problem situation. More trouble sleeping leads to stronger desire, which leads to more trouble sleeping, which leads to stronger desire. But that's circular. This is, so insomnia is a circular problem, but there are many of those. For example, if you start being worried about something, and then you want to escape that feeling of anxiety, you try to escape it, and you then, because you're trying to escape it, you actually have more of it, then you try to escape it more. That's another circular problem. So there are many of those, and Natto, I think, can really help not only with insomnia, but all these circular problems. So going on here, I said the starting point for the student is a state of Natto, attachment to outcomes. So when you are new to this channel, or you start working with a coach or a therapist or something like that, then you are in a state of Natto. You're really attached to the outcome. Sleep is, in this case of insomnia, sleep is really something you desire. You can't have it, you want it, you figure you're trying to get it, etc. And the goal is to get to a state of, or towards a state of Natto. I say towards because I don't think anybody can become fully unattached. That's more of a goal. But as you work towards being less and less attached, as you approach Natto, you do better and better. And I said here that the method here is warm teaching. Warm teaching is gentle, without judgment. Warm teaching is fluid. It adapts to the student. The student must not adapt to the teaching. I see a lot of that with actually traditional CBT-I, that, with traditional CBT-I, it's almost like you have to fit the mold. And if it doesn't work for you, then there's something wrong with you. That should never, ever be the case. The teaching has to adapt to the student, not the other way around. Natto is non-static. It evolves over time. Another problem with a lot of the traditional teaching is that if you look at, for example, CBT-I, it sounds like I'm really negative. I think CBT-I is where I come from. I have a deep respect for everybody who practices CBT-I, but I think there are problems with it. And one of them is that if you look at CBT-I 20, 30 years ago, it's really not much different from today. It hasn't really evolved. And I think the original, authors who created CBT-I probably wanted to see it evolving. So I think for Natto, it's not static. It should evolve over time. It is not dogmatic. It absorbs from any school that can help a student approach Natto. So again, going back to the CBT-I, I consider CBT-I that leads a client towards exerting less effort. That is part of Natto. I consider ACT a way towards Natto. I consider mindfulness a way towards Natto. So there are many ways to reach that non-attached state, if you will. Natto is results oriented. I think this is also important. I really want Natto to be practical. That's the goal. The goal is for somebody to get to a place where they sleep well. And there's no like secondary outcome that we measure. Sometimes when you look at studies of CBT-I again, they show that the sleep efficiency went up this much, but how did the client really become happy? That's always the goal. It should be result oriented. So I think those were kind of some of the really important parts I want to go over, and I just want to show you a couple of things here. The gas and brake model, of course, is here, which I talk about all the time. I think that's super important. The trouble and desire model is here, which I talked about. The perceived threat model is here, which I think is important. The 3P model, I haven't described in this document, but I think that's really, really good. So I consider that part of Natto. Again, anything that leads you to a place where you're not as attached to the outcome is great. And I think that should always be the goal, being approaching Natto that way. So here I describe like the way of detective work when you're looking for evidence that helps you, the tangible way where you take something that's untangible, like anxiety often is, and you make it more tangible by doing a thought download, for example. I describe the fearless way where you identify sleep efforts that you have and then abandon them. It's a good way, but a kind of an aggressive way that may not be good for everyone. We have the untangling way where when you are having trouble sleeping, your mind kind of creates all these connections like, oh, I slept better because I was on the left side of the bed, so now I have to sleep on the left side of the bed. The untangling way is about actually doing the opposite of what your brain suggests. We have the timeless way, which really comes from Michael Schwartz's teaching, the way of befriending wakefulness, the kind and gentle way, which is really about like self-kindness. We have the way of the friendly nudge, which is kind of using affirmations in a good way. And there's a lot more here. So I just wanted to give you a sense of what I've been working on. And as you hear me talk more about Natto and using more and more terminology from this teaching, I hope it will not be like surprising to you. And again, I hope this will really, really bring a lot of value to the world of sleep and beyond. And I hope you will join me in this journey towards creating a teaching that will really make a dent in the sleep universe. So please comment on this. Let me know what you think. And there'll be much more on this topic as we go forward. Until then,